SP Madam was selling tea. The officer slapped her. What happened next went viral. On a crisp September morning, 26-year-old Anya Walker sat quietly in the back seat of a government-issued black SUV as it cruised along the rural roads of Fairview County, Kentucky. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of nerves and conviction. This was her first official posting as a federal officer with the Bureau of Internal Law Enforcement, a job she had trained for at Quantico, where everything had been structured, disciplined, and theoretical. But out here, there were no mock drills, no multiple-choice tests. Only the raw, messy, uncomfortable truth of real American life. Fairview wasn't just any town, it had a reputation. High crime rates, political corruption, police misconduct. Locals called it the Hollow, a place where complaints disappeared and justice was optional. Anya had been assigned to oversee the region's law enforcement efficiency and accountability. That's how she met District Chief Peter Monroe, a grizzled veteran who had long since stopped believing the system could be changed. "Welcome to the real world, Walker," he'd said with a tired smirk, shaking her hand in his downtown Lexington office. "Fairview will teach you things Quantico never could." For the first few weeks, Anya played it by the book. She reviewed case files, skimmed internal reports, and quietly observed patterns. And what she saw disturbed her deeply. The town's central police station, Fairview Precinct, operated like a black hole. Reports of thefts, property disputes, and even harassment cases vanished without a trace. Worse, the bulk of the complaints targeted one man, Sergeant Ray Dawson, the commanding officer of Fairview Precinct. Anya's breaking point came on a rainy afternoon when an elderly woman, nearly blind and shaking with age, appeared at her temporary office in a battered raincoat. Her hands clutched a handwritten letter, ink smudged by water. Through broken sobs, she explained that her late husband's land had been forcibly taken by a local developer. When she went to Fairview Precinct for help, Sergeant Dawson had not only refused to take her complaint, he'd cursed at her and thrown her out. Anya looked into the woman's tired, defeated eyes. It wasn't just a land dispute. It was a symptom of a rotting system. And this was why she wore the badge, not to sit behind a desk, but to walk into the filth and do something about it. That night, sleep eluded her. She realized that if she entered the precinct with a badge and authority, Dawson and his cronies would clean up just enough to fool her. They'd hide their misdeeds behind smiles and paperwork. No, she'd never see the truth from behind her office desk. The next morning, she requested a private meeting with Chief Monroe. "I have a plan, sir," she said firmly. "But it's risky. And I'll need your permission to go off-grid." Monroe raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear it." "I want to disappear for a while. Go undercover as someone nobody notices. A vendor. A local woman. Someone who blends in. That's the only way I'll find out what's really going on inside that precinct." The chief stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. "That's dangerous, Walker. Ray Dawson's no fool. If he smells a trap." "He won't," she said. "But if I don't do this, that old woman won't be the last one crushed under his boots." After a long silence, Monroe nodded. "All right. But you check in every 24 hours. I'll assign one plainclothes officer to keep distant watch. And if anything feels off, we pull you out." With the plan in motion, Anya took a temporary leave of absence from her official role. In her place came Casey, a quiet, humble tea vendor who opened a small roadside stand just 50 feet from Fairview Precinct. Gone were Anya's tailored blazers and high heels. In their place, faded jeans, a weathered flannel, a worn-out baseball cap, and old sneakers. She practiced a new way of speaking, less polished, more local. Her shoulders slouched. Her eyes no longer scanned with authority, but with fatigue. Retired Officer Hank Brewster, a trusted man who had spent over 30 years in the force and knew every alley in Fairview, helped her set up the tea stall. He arranged a permit, scouted the spot, and stayed nearby as backup under the guise of a street artist. By Monday morning, Casey's tea shack was open. Anya's hands trembled as she fumbled with kettles and paper cups. The water boiled over. The first few customers scowled at her lopsided sugar ratios. But she kept at it. She learned quickly how to brew just strong enough, just sweet enough to keep people coming back. Her first regulars were, unsurprisingly, from the precinct. Beat cops, board dispatchers, and eventually Dawson's errand boys. They swaggered up, tossed coins on the table, rarely enough, and grumbled that officers shouldn't have to pay at all. "Consider it your civic duty, sweetheart," one said with a smirk, sipping for free. Anya lowered her gaze, mumbled thanks, and kept pouring. Day by day, Casey's stall became the unfiltered pulse of Fairview. Cab drivers, janitors, secretaries, all stopped by. They sipped tea and, between sips, poured their frustrations into the air. And Casey listened. Every word. Every sigh. Every injustice. And slowly, page by page, she began to document them all. Each night, Anya returned to the small storage shed behind her tea stall, where she had hidden a notebook beneath the floorboards. There, by the dim light of a battery-powered lamp, she documented every encounter, names, dates, conversations, even gestures. Her handwriting was quick but precise, the pages filling with first-hand evidence of a corrupt precinct operating with complete impunity. One of her most trusted allies remained Hank Brewster, the retired officer who posed as a harmless street artist. Each evening, they'd meet briefly behind the neighboring laundromat. She would hand him the day's notes, and he would discreetly deliver them to Chief Monroe. The reports were damning. False charges. Evidence tampering. Intimidation of victims. And it all pointed to one man, Sergeant Ray Dawson. Dawson's daily entrance resembled a movie villain. His loud, black Dodge Charger would screech to a halt in front of the precinct. 2 junior officers would rush to open the door. Dawson, tall and broad-shouldered, would step out wearing designer sunglasses, a smug expression on his face, and chewing cinnamon gum like he owned the town. He rarely spoke to Casey. But when he did, it was always with derision, never paying for tea, sometimes leering, always dismissive. He seemed to enjoy knowing she was beneath him. What he didn't know was that she had already built a case that could bury him. One sweltering afternoon, the event that changed everything occurred. Casey had just set a pot of water to boil when she heard raised voices outside. Through the haze of heat and dust, she saw Dawson's Charger slam to a stop in front of the stall. A moment later, a clattering sound echoed down the street. An elderly man, thin, hunched, riding a battered old bicycle, had accidentally scraped the front bumper of Dawson's gleaming car while trying to maneuver his loaded cart past. Dawson stormed out of the vehicle, eyes blazing. "You blind old man? You scratched my ride?" he roared. The man, Mr. Shambrook, a retired school janitor known by locals as Papa Joe, immediately folded his hands in apology. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't see." But it was too late. Dawson grabbed him by the collar and slapped him so hard that Papa Joe stumbled backward, his cap flying into the street. Blood trickled from his lip. The crowd that had begun to gather stood frozen, silent. Fear held them back. No one dared move. Dawson wasn't done. "You think you can damage police property and walk away?" he yelled, kicking Papa Joe to the ground. "I'll show you what happens when trash like you messes with the law." Anya froze. She'd seen injustice. She'd heard stories. But this was barbaric. Her mind screamed at her to stay in character. To stay quiet. To wait until the time was right. But her heart wouldn't let her. She slammed down the kettle, pushed through the crowd, and stood between Dawson and Papa Joe. "That's enough!" she shouted, her voice shaking but clear. "You're going to kill him!" Dawson narrowed his eyes. "What did you say?" "I said that's enough," she repeated louder. "You're a police officer, not a thug." The crowd gasped. A lowly tea vendor, confronting the sergeant? Dawson's jaw clenched. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he sneered. "You need to learn your place." He stepped forward and, without hesitation, slapped her. Hard. The sound echoed across the square. Her head whipped sideways. Her cheek stung. The world blurred for a moment. But she didn't cry. She didn't run. Instead, she slowly turned her face toward him, her eyes no longer meek, but sharp and burning. Silently, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out an old flip phone. Dawson blinked in confusion. She dialed. "Chief Monroe," she said clearly into the phone. "This is Officer Anya Walker. I need a team at Fairview Precinct. Now." It took Dawson a moment. Then the blood drained from his face. Anya watched his expression shift, from arrogance, to confusion, to horror, as realization dawned. The tea vendor. The quiet woman across the street. She was Anya Walker, the new federal officer. And she had seen everything. 5 minutes later, sirens howled in the distance. 3 police SUVs roared into view, screeching to a stop. Officers in tactical vests poured out. Chief Monroe stepped out of the first car. He scanned the scene, Papa Joe bleeding, Anya's reddened cheek, Dawson's frozen stance. Then he turned to the woman in dusty jeans and sneakers and gave her a sharp salute. "Ma'am." The crowd murmured in shock. "Ma'am? She's a cop?" someone whispered. Anya nodded, her voice steady. "Sergeant Dawson is under arrest for assault, abuse of authority, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice. I have video, eyewitnesses, and documentation of repeated violations of law and human rights." The silence broke. 2 officers stepped forward and cuffed Dawson, who stood trembling. The man who once ruled the streets of Fairview now looked like a trapped rat. Anya knelt beside Papa Joe and gently helped him sit up. "You're safe now," she whispered. "I promise." He stared at her, stunned. Who are you?" She smiled softly. "Just someone doing her job." In the weeks following Sergeant Ray Dawson's arrest, the atmosphere in Fairview shifted like a fog lifting after a storm. For the first time in years, people dared to walk into the precinct without fear. Whispers of, "The tea lady was a federal agent," buzzed through the community. Local newspapers ran headlines like, "Justice brewed at a tea stall," and "Undercover hero cleans house in Fairview." Anya Walker's covert operation, later dubbed Operation Teacup, had become a national sensation. She returned to her official office, where she was met not with suspicion, but with admiration. Her bold decision had exposed systemic corruption, and her bravery had inspired both civilians and officers alike. But even as praise poured in, Anya's instincts told her the war wasn't over. One evening, Chief Monroe called her into his office. His face was grim, his fingers drumming on a thick manila folder. "We've got a problem," he said. Anya's stomach tensed. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that smells like rot under a fresh coat of paint." He slid the folder across the desk. "Take a look." Inside were statements from witnesses who had initially been ready to testify against Dawson, now all retracting their claims. "Shambrook, Papa Joe, he's backing out too," Monroe added. "Got hit by a truck 2 days ago. Nothing fatal, but he's terrified." Anya closed her eyes for a moment. "That wasn't an accident." "No. It was a warning." Anya exhaled slowly. The threads of the puzzle were reweaving themselves into something far darker than a rogue sergeant. "Someone's pulling strings." "Not someone," Monroe said. "One man. State Representative Bernard Ray." The name hit like a stone. Bernard Ray, the beloved man of the people, was a prominent politician and media darling. But behind the speeches and charity dinners, he was a puppet master. Land seizures, extortion rings, shady development deals. Ray's name had been whispered in many of the reports Anya had gathered. Dawson hadn't just been a bad cop, he'd been Ray's enforcer. Anya stared at Monroe. "He's cleaning up. Silencing witnesses. Making sure Dawson walks. And if Dawson walks," Monroe said gravely, "you lose every case built around Operation Teacup. Your credibility. Your progress. Everything." Anya didn't flinch. "Then I have to go deeper," she said. Again. Monroe blinked. "Anya, I'll go as someone Ray can't suspect. Someone he'll welcome. You're risking everything again." She nodded. Justice is a high-risk game. 2 weeks later, the news quietly reported that Officer Anya Walker had been selected for advanced federal training in Virginia. Her name disappeared from Fairview's headlines. In her place arrived Amelia King, a sharp-tongued, high-powered executive representing an East Coast real estate firm looking to invest $200 million into a luxury development outside Fairview. Amelia wore sleek black suits, designer heels, and always carried 2 phones. Her hair was straight, her voice commanding, and her handshake firm. She booked the presidential suite at the Fairview Grand Hotel and drove around town in a black Lexus with tinted windows. She also demanded a meeting with Bernard Ray. Ray, ever hungry for deals and publicity, agreed immediately. The meeting took place at his sprawling countryside estate, a mansion masquerading as a farmhouse, complete with a private golf course and indoor heated pool. He greeted Amelia with his signature charm, gold chain glinting under his tailored shirt. "Miss King," he said, smiling as he chewed on a piece of peppermint gum. "I hear you're very interested in our little corner of Kentucky." Amelia smiled. "Very. I believe Fairview has untapped potential. But your approval is critical." She was perfect. Bold. Confident. Just the kind of outsider Ray thought he could manipulate. Over the next few weeks, Amelia, Anya in disguise, built trust with Ray's network. She attended luncheons, discussed land zoning loopholes, and hinted that her company didn't mind working off the books, if necessary. She even slipped envelopes of staged cash to Ray's middlemen, all of it recorded with tiny hidden cameras sewn into her designer clutch and necklace. Then came the breakthrough. During a private conversation, Ray laughed and said, "That tea lady stunt almost messed up my whole operation. But we're fixing it. Witnesses don't talk when you know where their families live." Anya pressed him. "And the officer, Dawson? He'll walk. My guys are working on it. Once he's out, we'll make sure that do-gooder never shows her face in this town again." It was all she needed. With every new recording, every careless admission, the noose tightened. But Anya knew she had to be patient. She had to wait for the right moment to strike. And soon, it would come. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Bernard Ray called Amelia King, Anya's alias, and invited her to finalize their deal at his estate. He sounded cheerful, smug even, like a man who believed he'd already won. "We'll wrap everything up today," he said on the phone. "Cash is ready. Contracts are printed. Once you sign, the land is yours." But Anya knew this wasn't just about land. This was the moment. The trap was set. She double-checked the tiny microphone embedded in her bracelet, the camera lens hidden inside the rim of her designer sunglasses. Outside the estate, in an unmarked surveillance van, Chief Monroe and a team from the Bureau of Internal Law Enforcement listened in. A tactical unit waited 2 blocks away, weapons ready, body cams rolling. Inside, Bernard Ray welcomed her with his usual grin, his large gold ring flashing as he gestured toward a mahogany table stacked with money-filled briefcases. "Here it is," he said, prideful. $3 million in clean cash. You sign and it's yours." Anya smiled as Amelia. But inside, her pulse thundered. "Before I sign," she said, leaning forward, "I need to know one thing." "Shoot. What happens to Sergeant Dawson?" Ray chuckled, waving his hand like brushing off a fly. "Don't worry about him. He'll be out soon. We got 2 more witnesses to walk. That tea-lady cop, she's out of the picture anyway. Whoever she was. I've got guys watching her house. She won't be a problem." Anya paused. Then smiled, slowly, coldly. "Maybe you should have paid closer attention, Mr. Ray." Before he could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the estate's front door. Then the windows shattered with synchronized precision as SWAT teams burst inside, yelling, "Federal agents! Nobody move!" Bernard Ray stumbled back from the table, eyes wide in disbelief as officers surrounded him. Anya stood calmly as Monroe entered through the door, rain dripping off his trench coat. "Mr. Ray," Monroe said, voice even, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and unlawful possession of undeclared currency. Ray's jaw dropped as he looked from Monroe to Anya. You, he stammered. You're not Amelia King? Anya pulled off her sunglasses, revealing her steel-gray eyes. Her voice, calm and powerful, filled the room. No, Mr. Ray. I'm Officer Anya Walker. And I've been watching you for weeks. She reached into her coat pocket and tossed a flash drive onto the table. Everything's recorded. Every deal, every threat, every confession. It's all there. Ray looked like he might faint. The once untouchable kingpin of Fairview stood handcuffed and silent as the agents led him out into the rain. The news broke that evening like wildfire. State Representative Bernard Ray arrested in federal sting. Undercover female officer brings down corrupt power broker. Local and national media couldn't get enough of it. The story had everything: corruption, courage, undercover intrigue, and a hero the public adored. But for Anya, the glory wasn't what mattered. What mattered was justice. Dawson's case was reopened. With Ray arrested and his grip broken, witnesses came forward again, this time without fear. Papa Joe, still recovering from his injuries, gave his full testimony from a hospital bed. Dozens of others followed. The rot had been cut out. And Fairview was finally healing. The tea stall across from the precinct was gone now, replaced by a flower bed planted by local volunteers. A plaque stood where Casey's Tea Shack once stood. To the undercover officer who reminded us what justice tastes like: hot, strong, and fearless. And still, Anya kept working, filing reports, attending hearings, mentoring young recruits. But her reputation had grown far beyond Kentucky. She was no longer just Anya Walker. She was the tea lady cop, the woman who took off her badge, stepped into the mud, and stood her ground. Months had passed since Bernard Ray's arrest, and though Fairview was calmer, Anya Walker knew too well that darkness often hides in silence. Her operation had sparked hope, no doubt, but it had also stirred old enemies. Inside her modest office at the newly reformed precinct, she sifted through case files. Reports of small-time corruption still trickled in: a traffic officer taking bribes, a clerk delaying permits for cash. The machinery was cleaner, but not spotless. One evening, as she locked her office, a plain envelope was slid under her door. No name. No return address. She opened it. Inside was a photo, grainy, black and white. It showed her, in disguise as Casey, handing tea to a young boy outside her stall. On the back of the photo, in shaky red ink, were 3 chilling words: "We never forget." Anya's stomach turned cold. She immediately alerted Monroe, who dispatched a security detail. The building was swept. Her home was put under surveillance. But no suspect was found. "This is a threat," Monroe said. "But it's also a warning. Someone out there still has reach." Anya nodded. "I know. Ray may be in prison, but his money isn't. His allies aren't. There's more to uncover." Determined not to be intimidated, Anya doubled her efforts. She reopened dusty, years-old case files: unsolved murders, missing persons, unexplained asset transfers. In case after case, names began to repeat: offshore companies, shell corporations, untraceable bank wires, all pointing to a deeper network Ray had only been a part of. Meanwhile, the people of Fairview rallied behind her. Local artists painted murals of the Tea Lady Cop. A scholarship was established in her name for girls studying criminal justice. High school seniors wrote essays inspired by her undercover bravery. But Anya kept her focus. She had climbed into the mud once. She would do it again if needed. One morning, while reviewing a sealed file from 4 years ago, she found something odd: a property deed transfer with signatures that matched those from Bernard Ray's private dealings. The land in question? A remote cabin deep in Fairview Forest. Anya felt a familiar spark ignite in her chest. She called Monroe. "I think I found something," she said. "Do you want backup?" he asked. "No," she replied, grabbing her flashlight. "Not yet." The drive through the forest was long and winding. The road narrowed. Trees closed in. The sun barely touched the earth through the thick canopy. She reached the cabin by early evening. It was old, abandoned-looking, but the padlock on the front door was new. Inside, dust coated the air, but the floor was swept, and faint footprints lined the hallway. In the basement, she found shelves. Stacks of paper. Boxes of files. Maps with pins and strings. A full blueprint of Fairview's criminal underworld. And in the center of the room, one wall entirely covered in photographs. Not just of her, but of Monroe. Of Hank Brewster. Of Papa Joe in the hospital. Someone had been watching them all. And they weren't done yet. Anya stared at the wall of surveillance photos in stunned silence. Her own face, caught mid-laugh in front of the precinct. Monroe sipping coffee outside his home. Hank Brewster feeding pigeons near the city square. Papa Joe asleep in a hospital bed. Every image was dated, labeled. She stepped closer and saw a scribbled headline pinned above the collage. "The ones who ruined everything." Anya's heart pounded. This wasn't just evidence, it was a hit list. Whoever had set up this cabin wasn't just holding on to secrets. They were planning something. She grabbed her phone and called Monroe. "I found a safe house," she said. "It's part archive, part war room. We're not dealing with scattered loyalists. This is organized. Coordinated. They're watching us, all of us." Monroe responded instantly. "Stay put. I'm sending a team." Within 20 minutes, unmarked SUVs surrounded the cabin. Forensics began collecting fingerprints, cataloging documents, scanning hard drives. One box contained a burner phone with dozens of unsent messages, coded updates about Anya's movements. Someone inside the system was feeding them intel. The rot wasn't gone. It had simply gone underground. Later that night, Anya sat with Monroe back at the precinct. They went over everything: names, maps, financial flows. Bernard Ray might be in a maximum security prison, but his syndicate still had operatives, men in suits, officers on the inside, local business owners, all working quietly, waiting for the dust to settle. "They're rebuilding," Monroe muttered. "No," Anya corrected him. "They never stopped." For a brief moment, the weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders. But then she remembered that old woman, the one who had come into her office months ago, clutching that torn letter about her stolen land. She remembered Papa Joe, crumpled on the street, and the helplessness in the eyes of so many. This fight wasn't just hers. It was for them. In the weeks that followed, Anya formed a new task force, a blend of federal agents, local officers, and vetted civilians who had once suffered at the hands of corruption. They called themselves Unit 44, named after the booth number of her old tea stall. Together, they launched quiet investigations into forgotten leads. They raided storage units, froze accounts, reached out to witnesses who'd given up hope. Bit by bit, the network began to crumble again, this time from the inside out. The people of Fairview watched it unfold, hopeful and proud. The woman they once knew as a humble tea vendor had now become a national symbol of resilience and justice. Still, Anya stayed grounded. She kept a worn tin cup from her tea stall on her desk. A reminder of the mask she once wore, of the voices she once heard, of the ground she once stood on, not as an officer, but as a citizen. Years later, when asked in a televised interview why she'd risked everything by going undercover, she simply smiled and said, "Because justice doesn't sit behind a desk. It walks among the people. It listens. And sometimes it serves tea." The screen faded to black. And beneath it, one line appeared. "Inspired by true events. Dedicated to every silent fighter who refused to stay silent."